So it's a real pleasure to introduce Dr. Jo Jolly to you all. So for those of you who don't know Jo, she's the Director for Natural Assets, Environment, Innovation at Ofwat. Jo's worked for over 20 years in infrastructure delivery and most significantly, the successful delivery of the Environment Agency's 2.6 billion six-year flood management programme. Before she was at Ofwat, she was head of Project Futures at the Infrastructure and Projects Authority in the Cabinet Office, and her team led the implementation of Transforming Infrastructure Performance Programme. She championed a much needed change in mindset and practice across the construction sector to unlock the best value for the economy. Jo was also a founding member of the Project Data Analytics Task Force as well. Jo today will be talking to you about project managers as planet stewards and the evergreen mindset. So over to you, Jo.
Thank you so much, Noreen. It's lovely to see you. And I think, Merv, by the miracle of technology, you're going to be sharing the slides. Is that
Yeah.
right?
You're going to have to say next, please, or something like that, Joe. But
Oh, well, thank you so much. And it's just filling my heart with joy seeing all the hellos from around the world. What an incredible event to be a part of. So, yes, as Nermeen said, I spent over 20 years in construction project delivery, and just to be really candid, sort of spent a lot of that time thinking, oh, why hasn't it worked this time? Why hasn't it gone as well as we wanted it to? I know I'll learn for next time. I'll try harder. I'll do better. And it eventually, I came to the realization that actually, as project managers, the root causes of why things go wrong is never, I don't believe, because we haven't tried hard enough, because we don't care, because we're not capable enough, because we haven't learnt enough. My belief, I don't believe those are the root causes. I think the root causes is the system that we create for people and for projects to be at their absolute best. And there's a reason why they need to be at their absolute best. And it's what we've heard in the introduction. And it's what we heard from Nermeen, that actually right here in Britain right now, in a heat wave in June, where our public transport system is failing. So this is why we need to be thinking about, yes, fine to go on to the next one. Thank you, Merv. This is why we need to be thinking about our role as project managers, not simply I say simply, in delivering the project, but what's not only our duty, but our potential to deliver value way beyond the benefits of the business case itself. And that to me feels like an incredibly invigorating, affirming, and to be honest, it's why I work in project delivery. It's why I do the job I do, because of the impact we can have through work. And so I'll just start with some, quite heavy thoughts. And again, my own personal view, living in a country at a time with such privilege, my own personal privilege, I feel, how do I use that privilege? How do I use it to the very best effect for those who have less privilege, who don't have a voice like I do, and in fact, maybe like nature, have no voice at all? How do we make sure that we are speaking for those and acting in everybody's best interest? Because I feel that's my duty. And actually, when I think, so I worked for the Environment Agency for 15 years in delivering flood risk management schemes, so flood defence construction projects. And my chief exec for a lot of the time there was a man called Sir James Bevan, and he wrote some incredible speeches. His background was as a government diplomat, actually, and so you can imagine he's a brilliant orator, and he writes very impressive speeches. And back in 2018, and 6 years ago, sorry, I can't do the maths, flipping it. 8 years ago, it gets worse. 8 years ago, he said about climate change, it's not as bad as you think. it's worse. And when you look at some of the statistics, that are just, I'm only stating facts here, wildlife population's down 73% in Britain since 1970. Globally, 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries have now been crossed. And it's our recognition then, isn't it, as project managers, that every project we deliver can either contribute to that trajectory or it can actually help to reverse it. What an incredible role that we have. So let's go on to the next slide, please, because, and again, let's continue to sit with the discomfort, because to my mind, as human beings, we change when something's uncomfortable enough and we move away from it, or it's attractive enough and we move towards it. And I believe we're in the incredibly invigorating position of having both. So yes, there's some real discomfort to sit with, the impacts of climate change, but my goodness, in the roles we're in, we can make a difference. And I find that incredibly hopeful and a daily driver for me. So let's tap into that energy of sitting with discomfort and also sitting with radical, ruthless hope and determination. And so we need to understand the root cause of the problem, though, don't we? We really need to get to the root cause of the problem. Otherwise, we'll be coming up with solutions that don't fix the problem. My belief is that's routinely, as human beings, very often what we do, because it's hard to get to the root cause. You have to think hard, you have to apply yourself, and you have to get to some pretty uncomfortable places, to be honest. My belief is the dominant forces we will feel, I think, for the remainder of my life, is the impact of climate change. I know there's many other strong, powerful forces we're feeling, political, AI, various things will have big impacts. But I don't believe there'll be a stronger force than the impacts of climate change. And the very nature of this problem is how fundamentally complex and interconnected it is. So it's non-linear. Things fail slowly and then suddenly. It's systemic. So everything across the globe is connected. And we have a system that we rely on for in the way we've developed the way we live, that's built on maximum profit just in time, not withstanding climatic shocks. So the system isn't built to withstand these facts. It's regressive. So the people and the environments that are most vulnerable are hit the hardest through climate change. And we know that we're underprepared. And the window to affect change, the best change, the maximum impact, obviously that window keeps closing. But it never closes. It never closes. There's never a time when we can't do things that create a better world, a fairer world, and a world that helps the whole system survive. But it requires a fundamentally different response. How we work now, how we think, needs to shift. So my view is, and again, when I was working at the Environment Agency, I'd hear from our delivery partners, the supply chain, we need a more stable program. We need a more stable program. Then we can be better. Then we can plan better and we can be more efficient. And I'd think, oh God, yeah, why can't I keep the program more stable? What's wrong with me? And then I realised, hang on, why does a flood risk program change? What are the big forces that change it? Well, it's the weather, it's politics, and it's global events. And I'm thinking, well, I can't keep those stable. So it's not about trying to force things to be the way we want them. We have to understand the way things are and build a system that meets them where they're at. So we need to work in a more agile, connected way. We need to be creating an environment where humans can be at their creative best to come up with solutions we haven't even thought of yet. So we build a system that meets the world and the challenges where they're at. We don't try to force the challenges to be something they're not, because we can't. And I believe that's where the fundamental cause of failure comes from. So if we go on to the next slide, and I'm going to keep you in a place of discomfort, because I think it's healthy, it's good. Let's sit with it, because let's understand, when projects fail, it's not just the projects that's failed, is it? What are the impacts? So as well as the root causes of why things go wrong, what are the impacts? What are the sort of like final destinations of the impacts of where things go wrong? And on the major project leadership academy in the UK, one of the first things we're taught by the Oxford Global Projects Company, who've studied over 15,000 projects globally. And they say that in studying those, the likelihood of one of those projects delivering on the original time, cost, and benefits in the business case is 1 in 200. And I remember just thinking, oh my goodness, who'd fly on that airline? Who'd be operated on by that surgeon with those stats? So we know these facts, but what are we doing to change the system? And like I say, just on this slide, this is what's impacted when projects fail. So every unaddressed root cause of project failure becomes someone or something else's problem. And the final thing I think that sort of brought it, sort of really hit me of quite a few years ago now, actually, if you go on to the next slide, Merv, that the Institution of Civil Engineers in this country ran a survey saying, what makes good design? What makes good design on a project? And one of the questions was, what are the main blockers for including greenhouse gas emission reduction and climate adaptation in your projects? And one of the main answers was, it's not part of the project brief. Like, we're not told to do it. Now, these are good people, aren't they? They're professionals. They'll be chartered engineers, all sorts of good people. But how has it happened? How has it happened that we've got to this place of learned helplessness, where unless we're told to do the right thing, we find it hard to do it? So let's also sit with self-compassion. Let's take care of each other. Let's work together to say, how can we actually build a brilliant, thriving project management profession and community where we are the game changers in so many of these issues? Because yes, the climate change is a systemic problem, so it needs a systemic solution. And I can't think of anything more systemic than project delivery, than project management, because everything's a project. And project delivery professionals touch everything everywhere, I believe. So let's go on to say, what can we do? What's in our power? What agency do we have? So the next slide talks about exactly this. How do we shift, because we can, from managing delivery to feeling that we're stewards of delivering long-term value? And so this does shift from managing symptoms and dealing with the day-to-day battles to really thinking about addressing root causes and creating the environment for projects to thrive, to deliver brilliant outcomes. Not just benefit realization, but multiple benefits beyond just the scope of the project, and really thinking about the regenerative value. Yes, we talk about risk management, but actually, how do we make those decisions? Are we acting with foresight, with integrity? And instead of thinking about the relatively short-term governance cycles, even over long-term projects, are we truly thinking about intergenerational thinking? 100 years from now, what impact will this project have? So let's go on to talk about how we can create the conditions for people and for the projects that mean that these outcomes are what we start to achieve. So one of the most important books that I've read, and if we go on to the next slide, please, is was Amy Edmondson's book about called The Fearless Organization, and the name itself is just tells you so much. And her studies into psychological safety started in a hospital, and she was studying hospital teams, and she noticed early on that the hospital team that was reporting the most mistakes in how they worked actually had the lowest mortality rate of their patients. Their patients did the very best. And she thought, hang on, is this right? The people the most mistakes having the best results. I don't understand this. But of course, it was the people who were able to make more mistakes, but they could speak up about them, they could share them with their colleagues, and they put in place things that would learn and improve. And this is the fundamentals of psychological safety. It's not about being nice all the time. And this slide that you're looking at was a deep study that we did with my delivery team at the Environment Agency, where we brought in, oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. Sorry, Stuart, I hope you can hear me now. We brought in business psychologists to work with us because we were struggling to use a more collaborative commercial model that took away mini tendering, and we had to just agree the costs through discussions. So it was a more collaborative commercial arrangement, and we really struggled. We really struggled to be able to do it, and so we worked with psychologists. And down the right-hand side was the traits that they saw in our teams. And as you look at it, it's not terrible. It doesn't sound terrible. You know, being nice all the time, deferring to leadership. These don't sound like terrible things. They're not terrible, but they're not what a psychologically safe team look like, and they don't lead to high performance, the very highest performance that you need to be operating at. And so on the left-hand side, it's what a psychologically safe team would look like. So the human conditions matter, but so do the project conditions. And if you go on to the next slide, my other realization has been if you get to the root causes of the project conditions, of course, you get to how the commercial and financial arrangements are set up. And I believe that how we procure, how we contract, how we pay, how we insure, how we allocate risk, all create the environment for adverse conditions, for the race to the bottom, and not about creativity, about innovation and delivering the best outcomes. The only alternative model I've found is one by a company called IP Initiatives, and they've developed a model called insurance-backed alliancing. I'm just picking up the chat as well. And insurance-backed alliancing. Sorry, I shouldn't have the chat on. I'm just checking things are okay. And what they have done is they've set up a system where they procure purely on behaviours. They get everyone in the room from the outset on day one, everybody who will be involved with delivering that project. The entire supply chain is paid a month in advance through a project bank account. And importantly, there is an insurance policy in place that means professional indemnity. It is not, the company's professional indemnity is not used. So that means when something goes wrong on the project, people don't say, oh, not my fault, I'll protect my professional indemnity. They say, I've got an idea, how can I help? Or I've got this thing wrong, I need some help. So creating the project conditions for the people on the project to thrive is fundamental as well. And then the final root cause, I believe, is who are we doing this for? So if you go on to the next slide, who isn't in the room yet? Ask yourself that. Future generations won't be there. Who doesn't have the voice? Who are we doing this for? What's the impact of getting it right? And what's the impact of getting it wrong? The underrepresented, the poorest in society, are the people who don't have a voice. and we should be there representing them. The global supply chain, do you know what you're procuring and the conditions of that whole supply chain right through to the very end? Do you know that? And actually, the rights of rivers and the rights of nature, increasingly in some countries, in Colombia, in Ecuador, in New Zealand, they have awarded rights to rivers and to nature, legal rights. So as project professionals, we increasingly need to be thinking of the legal obligations we would have for rivers and for nature. And to be blunt, ethically, we always have had these duties. So we'll finish with the last few slides. Let's look at an example. And this is a few years ago now. So the Boston Barrier Project, it's a flood defense project. And what they did a few years ago now was they looked retrospectively to say, I wonder what of the UN Sustainable Development Goals we actually positively contributed to through the project. Now, this was retrospectively, so they didn't intend to do this necessarily, but they were good people making good choices as they went through the project. And what they noticed was that the dots inside, the smaller boxes inside the UN Sustainable Development Goals that you're looking at, are the contributions that were made to the project through the choices they made. So, for example, the constructors only employed people within a 50-mile radius of the scheme. It's quite a deprived part of the UK. And so that contributed to more sustainable communities and decent work and economic growth. So you can see that through the choices you make, you can actually contribute to so much more than just the outcomes of the projects alone. So now the call to action. So if we've gone to the next slide, just take a moment of reflection. Think about the project you're working on. Think about, what are the root causes of your project that your project maybe isn't addressing but could be? What adjustments could you maybe make to help make your project conditions more set up for success, the real root cause conditions? Think about who isn't in your room, who doesn't have the voice, and how could you make sure they are heard? Some governance groups even have somebody representing nature on their governance board. Their role is to speak for nature. And what benefits are you thinking about? Not just in 2 years' time, also in 20 years' time, maybe in 100 years from now, because let's face it, in reality, that's not that far away. And you can impact things that persist way beyond the lifetime of the project. So let's go on to just some practical questions you could do this week. I've got 5 things, the next slide, that you could think about. Like I say, who isn't in your stakeholder register? Is it a local ecology group, a future resident or association, or maybe a school that you could work with to talk about what your project's doing? Think about the habitat in your project boundary or something that's nearby, something that your project will be impacting on. The recent IPBES report says that every single business, whether they know it or not, relies on the services of nature for free. So that means every single project, every single output will somehow be benefiting from the nature services of nature for free and will be impacting on nature. So really think about, what is that connection? It might not be obvious, but it is there. Maybe when you're talking to your supply chain, just ask them, what's your impact on the different questions? Let's get our brains thinking differently. What would the benefits look like for the longer term? And what have you shared with your project outside your organisation? Just think about one network, one sector forum that you could send a lesson learnt to this month. These are all things that we can just do. It doesn't require permission, doesn't require a new framework, doesn't require a budget line. So the final slide, our evergreen promise. And I was thinking about the analogy with evergreen plants. They've adapted to survive changing conditions and sometimes some pretty harsh conditions. And the result is they haven't just secured their own survival, but they create an environment that other things can survive in through those harsh conditions and thrive. So that's what we're asking of you. This isn't about heroics. It's not waiting for perfect conditions. It's the discipline and the courage to keep working on what matters and to invest in the outcomes beyond your and your project's lifetime. So it's not a role, but it is a choice that we can all make every day. Thank you so, so much. If ever anyone wants to get in touch, I'd be more than delighted to hear from you. And yeah, thank you so much, you brilliant people, being here today. And
Thank you,
I'm sorry
Jo.
about my network at times. Sorry.
Thank you, Jo. I mean, that was a real it's kind of scary in terms of what your boss was saying back in 2018, but then also there's so much we can do. So I've definitely taken some notes about, the 5 things we could do this week, the 60-second check-in. So no, that was brilliant. Thank you. We'll have questions for Jo and Hugo when we've done Hugo's talk. I've only noticed 1 or 2 in the chat. So if you just kind of carry on putting them in, we'll come to you. Okay, so now we're going to move over to Hugo. So a little bit about Hugo. Hugo's going to talk to you today about the weight of the cloud. So kind of something close to my heart. What AI data centers ask for from project managers. So as we know, AI is a hot topic, something new and more requirements every week. So a bit about Hugo. Hugo is an accomplished excuse me. He's an accomplished chair and executive director. He brings curiosity, dynamism, and decades of experience, including with Capgemini. Things he's done with his strategic change work have been based on benefits management. So he's changed the law to keep families together. He's reduced A&E time, so emergency room visits by 1 million. He's improved health and well-being across the region, and he also saved 10 million in 12 weeks for an electricity distributor in the UK. And professionally, Hugo is a committee member for the British Standards Institute, where he chairs a panel on benefits management. He's also a chartered manager. He's a chartered project professional, change professional, and he also has a PhD in protein chemistry. Hugo specializes in putting a number on the difficult benefits, such as sustainability and regeneration and publicly funded healthcare. So yeah, over to Hugo to hear about the cloud and AI. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nermeen. And I'd really like to thank Jo for handing out a mandate, for telling us project managers, it's up to us to do something about it. This is a subject very dear to my heart, the mandate that we have. I hope Merv's going to put my slides up at some point, because I'm assuming that he's doing them if he's already done Jo's. The mandate is close to my heart in that I believe project managers are uniquely influential within a project, even perhaps more so than the project sponsor. In part because we're close to the ground, because we know what's going on. So I'm really pleased to be following Jo. What I want to do in the next 20 minutes is take that mandate, point it at the hardest, the newest and most uncomfortable problem that we have got, because the mandate only means something when we make a genuine decision. Am I going to see some slides, or do I need to work out how to do it myself? I'm just looking across.
Sorry, no, Hugo, Merv's a bit slow. I think it's the heat. We'll be there in a moment.
I'll keep talking. So we call AI, we call data centers, we call them the cloud. The beautiful piece of marketing. The word suggests something weightless, floating free. No carbon, no water, no consequence. And it is a fiction. The cloud is bolted onto a building site somewhere on this planet. It's concrete and steel and silicon. It drinks electricity by the terawatt hour, and it evaporates water by the million liters. Now, you might notice that this is illustrated like a medieval manuscript. The article that this presentation is based on is part of a series, all illustrated like medieval manuscripts, in the Project Management World Journal. So here we go. We think of data centers. We treat data centers with a mixture of awe and incomprehension, just like a medieval villager might feel about the local monastery and the local dragon. By the end, I want the dragon to look less like a monster and more like something we can put to work if we're wise about it. Next slide, please. So every cloud is bolted onto a building site. Here's my claim, and everything follows from it. It makes it your problem as project managers more than anyone else's. I'm tackling perhaps one of the most difficult problems, but I will also explain how to apply it to your problems. So the fiction that they're weightless, costless, and consequent-free is a dangerous fiction because it lets us make enormous commitments of energy, of water, of rare materials without putting them into that business case. Think about who actually decides what a data center looks like. It's not the politicians who cut the ribbon. It's not the technologists who fill it with servers. It's the people like us who scope it, site it, procure it, and govern it through each of the stage gates. The weight of the cloud lands on the project manager's desk, whether we acknowledge it or not. You'll notice the story unfolding in the corner of these slides. Our ice dragon, the technology, has flown down from the rafters and is playing cards with the peacock. Peacock is the market, all display, all branding, very keen to be seen as green. They're bluffing each other about who is really sustainable. Keep an eye on them and we'll see how it turns out. Next slide, please. Let me give you the scale quickly because the numbers matter. It also means I can stop reciting them. In 2024, data centers worldwide drew 415 terawatt hours of electricity, about 1.5% of all the electricity humanity generates. In 2025, that grew by 17%. By the year 2030, it's expected to double. Here in the UK, we have around 140 data center schemes proposed. Together, they would want roughly 50 gigawatts, more than the entire peak demand of the country today. And behind every kilowatt sits water. A large data center can evaporate up to 19 million litres a day for cooling. Back to the marginalia. The data center dumps heat, moisture, and noise into the air around it. When it draws river water for cooling and returns it warm, it strips out the dissolved oxygen that fish need. None of that shows up on an energy bill. None of it breaches a regulation. It is invisible. You can see the dragon killing the fish. And that's exactly why it matters. Hold that thought. The cat, that's you, the project manager, has noticed the problem. Let's go on to the next slide. But the other side of the ledger, I'm not here to tell you that AI is entirely a villain. That would be too easy. It would be wrong, because the same technology is paying real environmental dividends. Machine learning has identified hundreds of thousands of new stable materials, the building blocks of better batteries and solar cells. AI-driven control is cutting energy use in buildings by more than 20%. My favorite example, because it's neatly circular, Google uses its own AI to optimize the cooling of its data centers and cut the cooling bill by 40%. The technology is optimizing the very thing that makes it expensive. So we have a genuine ledger, real costs on one side, real benefits on the other. And the other honest answer has to be, do the benefits outweigh the cost? The answer is it depends. It depends what decisions were made when these things were designed, sited, procured, and governed, which is to say it depends on project managers. That same breath from the dragon that was killing fish before is now turning a millstone and watering a garden. Same power, different governance. It's the whole talk in one little marginalia. On to the next slide. But there is a trap waiting for us. And perhaps this is the single most important point I'll leave with you. In 1865, a British economist called William Stanley Jevons noticed something strange about the use of coal. As steam engines got more efficient, as they squeezed more work from every lump of coal, 10 times more efficient over a 10-year period, Britain didn't burn less coal, it burnt more, because efficiency made steam power cheaper, and cheaper steam power meant everybody wanted it and used it for more and more things. We call this the Jevons paradox, and it's playing out in AI right now. The efficiency of AI, the energy per task, is improving roughly tenfold every year. Astonishing, and yet total energy consumption keeps climbing, not falling, because every efficiency gain makes AI cheaper, and cheaper AI means we make vastly more use of it. This is why it matters to a room full of project management. How many business cases have you written where the sustainability benefits are, this will be more efficient? We write efficiency in the benefits column, and we feel we have done our bit. But efficiency is not the same as sustainability. If you measure efficiency per task and stop there, you may be reporting a green benefit while total consumption goes up. The number that matters is total resources consumed. If your governance does not track that, the Jevons paradox will quietly eat your savings. We'll go on to a poll after this slide. But just to remind you, at the card table, the snail, which is sustainability itself with its little solar panel, has finally played the efficiency card. And yet, in spite of the efficiency card being played, the pile of gold coins on the table continues to grow and the peacock's delighted. If the poll's there, would you be able to put it up?
It's not, Hugo. You'll have to
Don't worry,
soldier
we'll
on.
carry on without. So far I've been talking about data centers, but I want to make this about your project, whatever it is. The data center taught us the first habit of a steward: see your invisible pollutants. The heat, the moisture, the noise, the warm water, the impacts that no regulation counts, that never appear in a risk register, but that quietly degrade the world around your project. Every project has them. A construction project dumps dust, vibration, and nighttime light. A transport scheme dumps severance. It cuts a community in half. A digital transformation dumps electronic waste and sometimes the quiet exclusion of people who cannot use the new system. None of these are illegal. All of these are real. So the first question I want you to carry out of this room is simply, what does my project dump that nobody is measuring? Ask that at the next stage gate. Ask it out loud. You'll be the only person who does, but you'll be a better project manager because of it. And this really affects your career progression, because this starts to say this is a strategic thinker, which takes you from a jobbing project manager through the program, through the portfolio, to somebody that the board wants to listen to. Right, here we are in the margins. The cat has stopped watching and started directing. It's overseeing monks building a stone vault, something built to last, designed for what comes after. That is stewardship, building a durable thing, not a disposable one. On to the next slide. The second habit is more ambitious and more hopeful. Do not only reduce the harm your own project does, point at your project's capabilities and AI especially at the biggest polluters: construction, transport, energy. The built environment alone is responsible for about 40% of global carbon. If your project can shave even a little off that, it dwarfs anything you could save inside your own fence. That's the difference between a project that's less bad and a project that is actively good, between reducing your footprint and being a catalyst. The data center that funds a wind farm through its power purchasing. The reactor that shares a perimeter it would have needed anyway. The AI model trained once at design time, then deployed to a lightweight tool that sips power instead of gulping it. So the second question is, what could my project improve beyond its own fence? What larger project problem could it nudge, catalyze, or unlock? Back to the marginalia, the dragon has curled its body around not just itself, but a small glowing egg, a small modular reactor, and the two of them share a single guarded wall. Neither could afford that protection alone. Together they can. That's the catalyst mindset, your project making something bigger than itself possible. Next slide. your brain, the one you use to be politely skeptical of me right now, runs on about 20 watts, a dim light bulb. On those 20 watts, it does richer, more parallel, more adaptive processing than any artificial system we have ever built. A single large AI training cluster draws hundreds of megawatts. That's a gap of 7 orders of magnitude, 10 million times. I do not say that to be anti-AI. I say it because it tells you exactly how to treat this technology as something extraordinarily powerful and extraordinarily expensive, a scarce resource to be used sparingly and deliberately when nothing else will do. Not sprayed at every problem because we can. The most sustainable AI strategy often begins with the question, does this need AI at all? Back to our marginalia beside the vast dragon, a single human brain glows on a candle, tiny, and yet look how brightly it burns. Next slide, please. So let me bring it back to where Joe started the project manager's mandate. When the next big infrastructure business case lands on your desk, and it will, I would ask you to do 4 things. Count total consumption, not efficiency, so Jevons paradox cannot fool you. Design the thing to be regenerated, not discarded. Look for synergy beyond your own fence. The renewable it can fund, the waste heat it could share, the bigger problem it could help solve, and use the heavy, expensive compute sparingly the way you would use any precious resource. None of that is on the critical path for cost or schedule. All of it is on the critical path for whether the thing we're building is worth its weight. Carbon, water, materials, these are not externalities to note in the risk register. They are first-order constraints, and they belong at every stage gate. At last, the cat, the dragon, the peacock, and the snail are all working together, tending an orchard. The technology, the market, the steward, and patient sustainability pulling in the same way. That's what the mandate looks like. Finally, to the last slide. The cloud is bolted to a building site. The weight is real, and the people in the room are the ones who decide whether it's worth carrying. That means you, by the way. When I say the people in the room are my audience. 2 questions to take with you. What does my project dump that nobody's measuring? And what could my project improve beyond its own fence? Be braver about those than the business case asks you to be. And our snail, with its solar panel on its back, slow and steady, has just crossed the finish line, and the dragon and the peacock are cheering it on. Slow, deliberate, unglamorous sustainability, winning the race. Thank you. The full article and the whole series are available on a link, easy to find via LinkedIn, and I would love to continue our conversation. Over to you, Nermeen.
Great. Thank you so much, Hugo. So again, massively insightful, and I think you've given delegates some simple ways to engage with how we can make a difference. So I just want to go to the Q&A now. We've got about a bit under 10 minutes. Just having a look. So I think this question for both of you, maybe Joe first. What are the main challenges you face when trying to define a business case for sustainability so that it's part of the project brief?
Awareness is probably one of them. That's where it starts, isn't it? I think the main challenge is if it's not thought about early on. So in order to try and reduce carbon or any of these things, it's not thinking about it early enough, and it's not being aware of the choices we can make and the agency we have. If I think about that Boston Barrier project, now that was mapped retrospectively. After the project was finished, the team looked back and said, I wonder, what value we brought beyond, what the project actually delivered. And like I say, that it was where they employed people from, that they went into schools, local schools, to talk about engineering and flooding and coastal erosion and climate change. So that contributed to better education. I don't know how much better it made anything, but you don't need to know, do you? It's just a good thing to do. And so I suppose the point is, if you can achieve all that without even trying, if you like. Imagine if you start every single project through the lens of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or some other framework. I just like that because it's so, you know, wide ranging, and it drives at equity as well as clean land, air, and water. But imagine if you have that in mind, it's like if you're going to, I don't know, buy a new car or something, you then start seeing that car everywhere, don't you? Whereas if you think at the start of a project, I'll just look for the opportunities through the choices I make to deliver more value against the UN Sustainable Development Goals. I won't be able to contribute to all of them, but you know, somehow I will be able to. And maybe if I could just give one other example quickly that isn't construction. So I had exactly this conversation on the Major Project Leadership Academy. I ran a session for one of the cohorts, and I said, so think about your project now, where it's at now, you know, and think about how could you build sustainability into the choices you make? And the person who won the prize, I just ran a little competition, the person who won a prize was from the Ministry of Defence, and his project was body armour for the army. And he said, you know, when I started, I thought, well, and the reason that we're having the project is it only fits one size of man, it doesn't fit smaller men, bigger men, and it certainly doesn't fit women. So his project was to design better body armor. And he said, well, that's gender equality, but I can't see how it contributes to any other UN Sustainable Development Goal. And then he said, actually, then I started thinking about it. You know, what if we manufacture this product in a more deprived part of the UK? What are the working conditions like for the people there? What can we do for the local environment? And he said, before I knew it, I could actually contribute to every single UN goal to some degree or another. And actually, after that session, he agreed with Army headquarters that he would be that every single business case would go through him, and he would screen it for contributions to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Now, that was something he was able to do, but he got agreement with Army headquarters that that's what all their business cases would go through that lens. So, you know, I'm not suggesting for a minute anything's easy. I know it's possible.
That's very inspiring. So kind of pivots in the way you're thinking and getting that mindset
Mm.
as just a way of thinking. Oh, great. And Hugo, I guess from your benefits management hat on, how would you approach this with the business case?
So I'm actually going to tackle this slightly later on in the process. If it didn't make it into the project brief, how do you squeeze it in after the event? Because a lot of the time I find that's what I'm doing, and that we're back to the Bring Your Passion to Work Day, where you say we're all on this conference because we're passionate about sustainability and regeneration. I presume. Anybody not? You're on the wrong conference if you're not. So we're coming in to run projects. We're jobbing project managers. We're being paid to do what we're told. Wrong. We're being paid to make it deliver something that's of great benefit to the organization and the organization. If the organization has a long-term view, then the organization is going to care about sustainability and regeneration down the line. Because if organizations support communities, then communities support organizations to do the things they want. I managed to open a health center into the evening after 6 p.m. The regulations on the building said could not be open after 6 p.m. because of noise. I went to the local elected councillor and I said, this is what we're trying to do. He himself went round the residents and wrote to all the residents and said, this is what we want to do. Complain to me if you want to complain. And he was the one who steered it through. So we got planning permission to open within a fortnight instead of the usual wait 6 weeks and be told that you've got to write a huge paper to justify your change. And then it's a year later before you actually get through your change. So working with the community, many projects are quite long and halfway through regulations will change. And then you have to do a whole lot of rework, which causes delays and goodness knows what. But most organizations are pretty clear. They know what the regulations are going to change to. So just be proactive about it. Say, as a project manager, you go in, you say, I think we'd be better off doing this to a higher standard. I think we could be better off by being proactive about this, because it's going to cost the company money if we don't. And the regulations are going to carry on improving, whatever some political parties say. And we might as well face up to that. If we put in a project now that's got an asset that's going to last 10 years, in those 10 years, the regulations are going to change. We might as well put in the higher standard now. In terms of being proactive, my favorite example is Scania, the truck and bus company. Truck and bus, whoever knew that could be made sustainable? So they decided they were going to manufacture everything to be, all the components in their trucks and buses to be reusable, recyclable, and they were going to make all their trucks and buses run on biodiesel. Their customers all said that makes them more expensive to buy. So they said, right, we'll lease them to you, because over their whole, they were more expensive to buy, but over their whole life cycle, they were cheaper. So they started leasing. They then said, right, people aren't using biodiesel. Right, what we'll do is we'll include in the lease the cost of the fuel, and we'll establish filling stations right across Europe with biodiesel, because typically biodiesel is manufactured where it's sold. And they said, if you buy from someone else, it's coming out of your pocket. If you stop at one of our filling stations, you've already paid. Now, magically, amazingly, a whole lot of people started using biodiesel. They look at their stats and they say, the types of journey this vehicle is doing could be better done by an electric vehicle. And since you're only leasing, we can swap you out. So they were moving people to electric vehicles. They were looking across their bus fleet and saying, they've all got the same basic drivetrain. We can develop an electric drivetrain that swaps in. We developed it. We're now starting to slot the electric drivetrain in. And that took guts, because they were jumping into a market where they could have completely destroyed their company with all its jobs. And instead, they've now got all their customers saying, we want to lease, turning around to their existing suppliers and saying, no, it's cheaper to get from Scania. And then their existing customers turning around and saying, oh, by the way, we've told our customers, the supermarkets have told their consumers that our transport chain uses biodiesel. So we can't go back to Ford because you don't use biodiesel. So they've ended up carving a whole new market by taking a really scary decision.
Yeah, that takes a very bold kind of leadership, and it is that sustainable mindset, isn't it? And the systems thinking, what are all the elements that could make this true? So yeah, excellent. Okay, well, I think we're actually at time now. So I just want to say thank you to Joe and Hugo. So round of applause for them. And I hope you've all found things that you can take away and, make your project management more effective to deliver sustainability.